Heavy snow fell outside the towering windows of the Grand Summit Hotel, each flake swirling in the warm golden light cast by chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The frigid air slipped through small cracks every time the grand entrance doors opened, carrying the icy breath of the snow-covered Cascade Mountains. Inside, the opulent ballroom buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the gentle notes of live jazz from a band in the corner. The annual Winter Charity Gala was a gathering where the elite flaunted their generosity and reinforced their social standing. However, for Aisha Carter, a Black American woman working as a server at the hotel, this luxurious setting was a harsh reminder of the vast distance between herself and the guests she served. Aisha moved deftly through the crowd, a tray of champagne balanced perfectly in her hand, despite the erratic rhythm of her heartbeat. Her fitted black uniform blended with the other servers, but her eyes continuously scanned the room, searching for a face. She knew he would be here, Ethan Caldwell, a white American billionaire, and the man behind this event. 4 years ago, they had shared moments that felt like they would last forever. Long nights talking about dreams, holding hands under the moonlight, and promises of a future together. But then, Ethan left, chasing an international deal in London, leaving Aisha with a shattered heart and a secret she never dared to reveal. Jaden, their 3-year-old son, now asleep in the staff lounge, far from the dazzle of the gala. She paused near an elaborately decorated buffet table, setting down her tray to rearrange the sparkling champagne flutes. The chill from a nearby window made her shiver, but that wasn't the only reason she trembled. Aisha knew that if Ethan recognized her, everything she had built her fragile life with Jaden could collapse. She had chosen silence 4 years ago, not because she didn't love him, but because she was afraid. Afraid he would reject the responsibility. He worried that she and her unborn child would become burdens to his ambition. She had once stood outside his office in New York, 3 months pregnant, clutching her phone, but lacked the courage to dial his number. His number was disconnected, as if fate intended for her to keep this secret forever. Aisha, hurry up. The guests are waiting. The voice of Marcus, her trusted coworker, snapped her out of her reverie. With his warm smile and mischievous eyes, Marcus was the only person at the hotel who knew about Jaden, though not the whole story. Aisha had once saved him from being fired over a minor mistake, and since then he had always looked out for her, from taking extra shifts to watching Jaden when she was swamped. Aisha nodded, forcing herself to focus. She picked up the tray and stepped back into the crowd, trying to become invisible, and then she saw him. Ethan Caldwell stood among a group of investors, his deep navy suit tailored to his tall frame, his blonde hair neatly combed, and his sharp eyes radiating the confidence of a man who had conquered the world. He was telling a story, his baritone voice drawing laughter and approving nods from those around him. Aisha's chest tightened. He looked different from the man she once knew. His features were more chiseled, his presence more commanding, but there was still something in him that resembled the young man who once held her hand and dreamed of changing the world. She lowered her head, hoping to blend in with the crowd, but her eyes couldn't leave him. She remembered the last time they met in a small cafe in Brooklyn. Ethan had spoken excitedly about the deal in London, his eyes gleaming with a hunger for the skies. Aisha, this is our chance to have everything, he had said, gripping her hand so tightly she could feel his heartbeat. But when she discovered she was pregnant a few weeks later, he had vanished without a word, leaving behind a brief message. I have to go. I'll call you soon. That call never came. Aisha had convinced herself he didn't want to be tied down, that she and the baby would only be obstacles. But now, watching him stand just meters away, she couldn't stop the flood of emotions, pain, longing, and fear. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the roads to the hotel, as if trying to bury her secret beneath layers of ice. Aisha forced herself to turn away, focusing on her task. She walked past a group of guests, murmuring about million-dollar investments, trying to ignore Ethan's voice rising behind her. But then, as if pulled by an invisible force, she glanced at him again. And at that moment, Ethan's eyes swept the room and landed on her. Time froze. His blue eyes sharp and deep-locked onto hers, a flicker of recognition sparking within them, as if he was trying to remember something long forgotten. Aisha's breath caught in her chest. She quickly lowered her head, pretending to adjust the tray of champagne, but her heart pounded like it might explode. Did he recognize her? Or was it just a fleeting glance? A coincidence amid hundreds of faces in the room? She didn't dare look up to check. If he came closer and spoke her name, everything she had tried to protect Jaden's life, their fragile peace would melt away like snow under sunlight. Aisha, are you okay? Marcus appeared beside her, his voice low and full of concern. He glanced toward Ethan, then back at her, his eyes silently asking if she needed him to step in. Aisha nodded quickly, forcing a smile. I'm fine. Just a little cold. Marcus frowned, clearly unconvinced, but didn't push. Call me if you need anything, okay? He gave her shoulder a gentle pat before returning to his tray. Aisha took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She couldn't let Ethan recognize her, not now, not here. Jaden was waiting for her in the lounge, his blue eyes so like his father's, shining with innocent trust every time she promised she'd be back soon. She had sworn to protect him from every storm, even if it meant keeping him forever hidden from his father. But as she glanced at Ethan again and saw him tilt his head slightly, as if puzzling over a mystery, she knew her secret now stood on a dangerous edge. The snow continued to fall outside each flake, like a warning that this winter would not just be cold, but full of storms. Aisha gripped the champagne tray tighter, determined to survive the evening without letting the past catch up to her. But deep down, she knew Ethan's gaze had not been random. He had seen her, and though he hadn't realized it yet, a part of his memory had awakened, threatening to pull them both into a storm no one could predict. Snow continued to fall relentlessly outside the Grand Summit Hotel, each flake swirling, as if trying to drown the world in a frozen white veil. Inside the ballroom, light from the chandeliers reflected off the marble floor, casting shimmering patches like stars. Aisha Carter weaved through the crowd of guests, the champagne tray in her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to maintain a calm exterior. Ethan Caldwell's fleeting glance, just minutes earlier, still clung to her like a smoldering ember threatening to burn down the wall of secrecy she had built around Jaden, their 3-year-old son. She told herself to focus on her work, to remain invisible among the stream of servers. But her heart refused to listen, pounding wildly every time she thought of Ethan's sharp blue eyes. She stopped by a banquet table adorned with white orchids and silver candles, setting the tray down to rearrange the glistening champagne flutes. The chill from the nearby tall window seeped through her thin uniform, making her shiver. But the cold was nothing compared to the emotional storm churning inside her. Aisha knew that just one careless moment, a prolonged gaze, an accidental word could make Ethan recognize her. And if he did, how would he react? Would he be angry that she had hidden Jaden? Would he turn his back, like she had feared 4 years ago? Or worse, would he want to take Jaden away, dragging the boy into a world of luxury she didn't belong to? Aisha, you okay? You look like you just saw a ghost. Marcus, her close colleague, appeared beside her, his deep, warm voice laced with a hint of teasing. He held a tray of desserts, his eyes glancing at her, then shifting toward Ethan, who stood surrounded by investors not far away. Marcus didn't know the whole story, but was perceptive enough to sense Aisha's tension. Don't tell me that charity tycoon has you shaken. Word is, he just signed a multi-million-dollar international deal. Guys like him overlook folks like us. Aisha forced a strained smile, trying to deflect. It's just too crowded. You know I'm not great with crowds. But Marcus's words about Ethan's success cut deep, like a blade into an old wound. The distance between her and Ethan was no longer just a memory, a chasm. He was a billionaire. She was a single mother struggling with rent and night shifts. She lowered her head, pretending to check the champagne glasses, but memories of Ethan rushed in vivid, as if they had happened yesterday. She remembered the nights they sat on the worn couch in her small Brooklyn apartment, the street lamp's glow seeping through the curtains and lighting his face. Ethan used to talk about building a business empire, his blue eyes shining when he spoke of helping underprivileged communities. Aisha, you know what I want to leave a legacy. I want the world to remember me, he once said, gripping her hand so tightly she could feel his heartbeat. She believed they would chase those dreams together, and that their love was strong enough to endure anything. But when he received the offer to go to London, the excitement in his eyes made her feel small, as if she was no longer part of the future he envisioned. And then when she found out she was pregnant, he disappeared, leaving only a short message and a gaping silence she could never explain. Aisha took a deep breath, forcing herself back to the present. She lifted the tray of champagne and stepped into the crowd, trying to blend in with the flow of servers. But each step seemed to bring her closer to Ethan. He was still there just a few meters away, his confident smile in place, as he shook hands with an investor. His navy suit was tailored to perfection on his tall frame, his blonde hair neatly combed, and his deep voice echoed as he told a story that made the group laugh. She couldn't ignore the transformation. Ethan from 4 years ago had been passionate, but uncertain. Now he exuded power and precision, a man who had conquered the world. And yet, beneath that polished exterior, she still saw a trace of the young man who once whispered to her that she was his whole world. She lowered her head, intending to turn away, but a strange sensation made her glance up. Ethan was looking straight at her. His blue eyes locked onto hers, a flicker of recognition sparking, as if he were trying to piece together a forgotten memory. Time seemed to freeze. Aisha felt her breath catch her grip on the champagne tray so tight that her knuckles turned white. Did he recognize her? Or was it just a random glance, like how he might scan the faces of hundreds of people in the room? She wanted to turn away to flee, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. Ethan's gaze didn't leave hers, and in that moment, she felt her secret, Jaden the boy, with eyes just like his, teetering on the edge of exposure. Champagne. Sir, Aisha spoke, her voice trembling slightly, trying to break the silence. She extended the tray toward Ethan's group, hoping the motion would distract him. But Ethan didn't respond immediately. He tilted his head, his eyes still fixed on her, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Thank you, he finally said, his voice low and deliberate, reaching for a glass, but never taking his eyes off her. The people around him didn't notice the tension. They continued chatting and laughing, but to Aisha, the world had narrowed to her and Ethan. She quickly turned and walked away toward the buffet table, her heart thudding like it might explode. She set the tray down, pretending to rearrange the glasses, but her thoughts were chaotic. He had seen her. He was suspicious. She knew that look, the look of a man who didn't let go of a mystery easily. Even 4 years ago, Ethan had always been like that, when he pursued her relentlessly, even after she initially turned him down, saying she didn't want to fall for someone so ambitious. But he had made her believe their love was real, that they could overcome any barrier. And now that same look threatened to tear down the walls she had built to protect Jaden. Aisha, do you need a break? Marcus appeared again, concern filling his eyes. He glanced at Ethan, then back at her. I saw him looking at you. Something going on? Aisha quickly shook her head, forcing a smile. It's nothing, Marcus. He Looks familiar. That's all. But Marcus wasn't easily fooled. He frowned clearly, wanting to ask more, but eventually just nodded. If you need me, call. Don't let these rich folks rattle you. He gave her shoulder a gentle pat before returning to work. Aisha stood there still gripping the tray, her eyes drifting unconsciously to the window. The snow was falling harder now, blanketing the world outside in white, as if trying to bury all secrets under layers of ice. But she knew no snow was thick enough to hide the truth forever. Ethan had seen her, and though he hadn't fully realized it, a part of his memory had begun to stir. She felt a tightening in her chest, as if winter had crept outside and into her heart, cold and unforgiving. She had to get through this night. She had to keep Jaden safe. But Ethan's gaze felt like a warning. The storm was coming, and no one could escape it. The snow outside the Grand Summit Hotel had slowed, but the air remained bitterly cold, as if winter was tightening its grip around the secret Aisha Carter held in her heart. Inside, the ballroom light from the chandeliers reflected off the glamorous faces of the guests. Laughter and jazz music mingled, forming a lavish contrast to the emotional storm raging inside Aisha. She had just escaped the suspicious gaze of Ethan Caldwell, the white American billionaire who had once been the love of her life, and who unknowingly was the father of Jaden, their 3-year-old son. The moment their eyes met still made her heart race, as if the wall she had built to hide the truth was shaking under a mighty wind. Aisha moved swiftly through the crowd, the tray of champagne in her hands, her only shield helping her blend in with the flow of servers. She tried to focus on her work, but every step felt like descending into a maze of fear and memories. She couldn't forget Ethan's eyes, those sharp blue eyes that had flickered with suspicion, as if he were trying to reassemble a lost puzzle piece. She knew he wasn't someone who let mysteries slide, which made her anxious. All it would take was for him to call her name, to remember everything she had sacrificed to protect Jaden would vanish like snow under the sun. She stopped at a corner of the ballroom, where white orchids and silver candles were elegantly arranged on the buffet table. She set her tray down, pretending to tidy up the champagne glasses, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She thought of Jaden sleeping in the staff lounge, his blue eyes identical to Ethan's, shining with innocent trust when she promised to return soon. She had sworn to keep him safe, even if that meant keeping him hidden from his father forever. But now, with Ethan only a few meters away, her secret felt like a small flame that could erupt with the slightest gust of wind. Champagne. A deep voice laced with sarcasm pulled Aisha from her thoughts. She looked up to see a tall, lean man in a gray suit, a press badge pinned to his chest. His name was Victor Kane, and his sharp eyes were like a hawk's constantly on the hunt. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone searching for something to exploit. A cold shiver ran down Aisha's spine, not from the winter air, but from the invisible threat in his gaze. "Thanks, but I'm working," Aisha replied, calm but firm. She lifted her tray, ready to walk away, but Victor smoothly stepped before her, his move casual yet intentional. "Hold on," he said, his tone like he was chatting with an old friend. "I noticed you glancing at Mr. Caldwell quite a bit. Something interesting there. I'm writing a piece on him, and I bet you know something worth telling." Aisha gripped the tray tightly, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm just a server. I don't know anything about Mr. Caldwell." But her words didn't deter Victor. He tilted his head, his gaze drifting from her to Ethan, still talking with a group of investors nearby. "Really?" Victor said, his tone mocking. "Because you were looking at him like, there's a whole story behind those eyes. And I'm pretty good at digging up stories, Miss Carter." The way he said her name made her heart skip a beat. How did he know her name? She glanced at her staff badge and realized he must have read it earlier. But the way he said it, emphasizing it, made her feel exposed. "I have nothing to say," she replied, her voice sharper, trying to step past him. But Victor moved again, blocking her path. "No need to rush," he said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "I pay well for information you know. Someone like Ethan Caldwell, with a squeaky clean image and $1 million empire, must have a few skeletons. An old flame, a little scandal. Anything. You help me, I help you. Simple as that." Aisha felt the blood rush to her ears, equal parts anger and fear. She wanted to shout at him to tell him to get lost, but she knew that would only make things worse. Victor wasn't the type to give up easily. She'd seen journalists like him always lurking around the hotel, hunting for drama to sell to tabloids. But he wasn't just sniffing around this time. He was targeting her, and worse, targeting Jaden. If he discovered the boy sleeping in the staff lounge, her life would be ripped apart on the front pages if he found out the truth. "I don't know what you're talking about," Aisha said, her voice cold as the snow outside. "Now excuse me, I have work to do." She stepped past him, brushing close to his shoulder, but Victor didn't stop her this time. Instead, he winked, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "Think about it, Miss Carter. I'll be here all night, and I'm very patient." He turned and melted into the crowd, but Aisha could still feel his eyes on her like a ghost waiting for the right moment to strike. She hurried to the buffet table, setting her tray down with a soft clink. Her hands shook so badly she nearly spilled a glass of champagne. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but Victor's words echoed in her mind. He'd seen her looking at Ethan. He was suspicious. And if he dug deeper, if he found out about Jaden, she couldn't even bear to think about it. She glanced toward the window, where snow fell in silence, each flake a reminder that her secret was under threat. She thought of Jaden, his innocent smile during bedtime stories, the way he clutched his teddy bear, and asked when she would take him to see the snow. She had promised to protect him, no matter the cost. "Aisha, are you okay?" Marcus appeared beside her, his eyes filled with concern. He glanced toward Victor, who was now chatting with a guest nearby, then back at her. "What did that guy say to you? You look like you're about to punch someone." Aisha shook her head, forcing a smile. "Just a nosy journalist, nothing serious." But Marcus wasn't easily fooled. He frowned, lowering his voice. "If he bothers you again, just tell me. I know how to deal with guys like that." Aisha nodded, grateful for his concern, but knew no one could protect her from the threat Victor represented. She picked up her tray, ready to return to work, but her gaze unconsciously drifted toward Ethan. He was still laughing and talking with investors, but something was different. He tilted his head, as if searching for someone in the crowd. Aisha felt her chest tighten. Was he looking for her? Had his earlier suspicion turned into a question he was determined to answer? She quickly turned away, walking toward the corner of the room, but the feeling of being watched clung to her. Victor was somewhere in this room, and so was Ethan. In different ways, both threatened to unravel the secret she had kept hidden for 4 years. The snow outside continued to fall softly, blanketing the world in white. But Aisha knew no snowfall was thick enough to bury the truth forever. She gripped the tray of champagne tighter, determined to survive the night without letting her secret slip. But deep in her heart, she sensed a storm was coming. And Victor Kane, with his predatory eyes and sinister smile, was the first spark. The snow outside the Grand Summit Hotel had begun to thin, but the cold still bit into the skin, to remind Aisha Carter that winter was not just a season, it was a state of her heart. Inside the ballroom, the soft jazz blended with the laughter of the elite guests. But that sound only deepened Aisha's sense of isolation. The brief encounter with Victor Kane, a hawk-eyed journalist, still made her tremble. His veiled threat, "I'm very good at digging up stories," echoed in her mind, like a warning that the secret of Jaden, her 3-year-old son, with Ethan Caldwell, was on the verge of being exposed. Aisha moved quickly through the crowd, the champagne tray in her hands feeling as heavy as lead. She tried to focus on her work, but every glance from the guests made her flinch as if they could see straight through her. She thought of Ethan, the white American billionaire, who was somewhere in this very room. His suspicious eyes had locked on her just minutes ago. She knew he was trying to remember her, and the thought made her heart race. But more than anything, she thought of Jaden, the little boy, with Ethan's blue eyes now asleep in the staff lounge. She had promised to keep him safe no matter the cost, but Victor's presence and Ethan's gaze made her feel the protective walls around Jaden starting to crack. She paused at a quiet corner of the ballroom, placing the tray on a small table adorned with silver candles. The cold air from a nearby window seeped through her thin uniform, making her shiver. She needed to check on Jaden to ensure he was still safe. Victor had rattled her, and she couldn't bear the thought of him lurking near the staff lounge, hunting for a scrap of information to sell to the tabloids. "Marcus," she called softly, scanning the room for her trusted co-worker. Marcus was near the buffet table, chatting with another staff member. He turned, his face tightening with concern when he saw Aisha's anxious expression. "What do you need?" he asked, quickly approaching. "Can you watch this tray for a bit?" Aisha asked, her voice shaky. "I need to check on something." Marcus frowned, but didn't press her. He knew about Jaden. The boy was Aisha's entire world, even if he had never asked for the whole story. "Go," he said, giving her shoulder a light pat. "I've got it. But hurry, the manager's circling." Aisha nodded gratefully, then rushed out of the ballroom, her footsteps almost a run on the icy stone floor. The hallway to the staff lounge was dim and quiet opposite the ballroom's liveliness. The faint glow of wall sconces cast long shadows on the floor. Aisha's heartbeat quickened with every step. She thought of Jaden, his bright smile when she told stories of trains crossing snowy mountains, how he hugged his teddy bear and whispered dreams of building model trains when he grew up. Jaden was why she woke up each morning. She was the only light in her difficult days as a single mother, surviving on a meager paycheck. But now, with Victor circling and Ethan so close, she feared light could be extinguished. She pushed open the lounge door, a small room with a few worn armchairs and a fold-up bed in the corner. The dim glow of a desk lamp lit the bed where Jaden was supposed to be sleeping. But when Aisha looked closer, her blood turned cold. The bed was empty. The blanket was rumpled, and Jaden's favorite teddy bear lay on the floor as if he had hurriedly left. "Jaden," Aisha called, her voice cracking with panic. She dropped to her knees, checking under the bed, then darted to the room's corners. No boy, no trace. "Jaden," she called louder now, not caring if her voice echoed into the hallway. She opened the closet and looked behind the curtains, but the small room offered no hiding places. Terror gripped her chest like an icy hand. Jaden was only 3, easily lost, easily scared. What if he had woken up and gone looking for her? What if he had wandered into the ballroom where Victor or Ethan could see him? The thought of Victor snapping a photo of Jaden and noticing those unmistakable blue eyes made Aisha want to scream. She couldn't let him turn her son into a headline. She dashed into the hallway, nearly crashing into Marcus, who had come running after hearing her shout. "Aisha, what's wrong?" he asked, eyes wide with worry. "Jaden. Jaden's gone," Aisha choked out. "He's not in the lounge. I left him with Lisa, but now he's missing." Marcus gripped her shoulders, trying to calm her. "Take a breath. Where's Lisa? Did she say anything?" Aisha shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't know. I have to find him, Marcus. If he's in the ballroom, if Victor sees him." Marcus nodded instantly, grasping the gravity. Okay, we'll look. You check the east hallway. I'll check the west. If Lisa's nearby, I'll ask her. Don't panic, Aisha. Jaden couldn't have gone far, but his words did little to ease her dread. She nodded and bolted down the hall, calling Jaden's name, her voice growing more desperate. Jaden, where are you? Her cries echoed through the quiet hallways, but only the wind howling through the windows answered her. She sprinted down dark corridors, checking every corner, every door. Each second that passed was a blade slicing into her heart. She imagined Jaden wandering the hotel, his tiny feet on the cold floors, his blue eyes wide with fear as he searched for her. She thought of Ethan, his suspicious stare. If Jaden appeared before him and saw the boy, he would know instantly. Those eyes that smiled Jaden was Ethan's mirror image, and the truth would no longer be hidden. She stopped at a junction, gasping for breath, bracing herself against the wall for support. The snow outside the windows fell more lightly now, but the cold still seeped into her bones. She felt like winter was swallowing her whole, as if everything she loved was buried beneath layers of ice. Then from a distant corner she heard a faint sound. Mommy. A small, trembling voice, undeniably Jaden's. Aisha ran toward the sound, her heart pounding. She dropped to her knees beside a large pillar where Jaden stood clutching his teddy bear, his blue eyes glistening with tears. Jaden, she cried, pulling him into her arms, holding him so tightly she feared he might vanish again. Where did you go? I was so scared. Jaden whimpered, his voice small. I woke up. Didn't see you. I was looking. Aisha stroked his hair, fighting back tears. I'm here now, baby. I'm right here. But even as she held him, the feeling of safety lasted only a moment. She glanced over her shoulder, terrified that Victor or Ethan might appear at any second. The hallway was still empty, but she knew danger lingered. Jaden had almost been discovered, and her secret now balanced on the thinnest edge. The snow continued to fall silently outside, like a quiet warning. The real storm had not yet begun. The snow outside the Grand Summit Hotel had almost stopped, with only a few flakes floating in the darkness, like the final whispers of winter. But the cold still clung tightly to the empty hallway, where Aisha Carter had just found her 3-year-old son Jaden, after a terrifying moment when she thought he had gone missing. She held Jaden close, feeling his small heartbeat thudding against her chest. But the relief lasted only a second. The fear that Victor Kane, the predatory journalist, or Ethan Caldwell, Jaden's father, might appear at any moment made her tremble. The secret she had guarded for 4 years, that Jaden was the son of Ethan Caldwell, the white American billionaire hosting the charity Gala, was on the verge of being exposed. Kneeling beside a large pillar, Aisha gently stroked Jaden's hair, trying to soothe him. I'm here now, baby, she whispered, her voice trembling. Jaden clutched his teddy bear tighter, his blue eyes glistening with tears, yet shining with innocent trust. I was scared. I couldn't find you, he murmured, his voice no louder than a breath. Aisha kissed his forehead, fighting back her tears. She thought of the nights she told Jaden stories about trains crossing snowy mountains, of how he smiled brightly, and asked if they could build a model train together one day. Jaden was everything she had, and the thought that he had nearly wandered into the ballroom where Victor or Ethan could have seen him made her want to scream. Let's go back to the lounge, Aisha said, standing and taking Jaden's hand. She needed to get him back to safety, away from Victor's prying eyes and Ethan's probing stare. But as she turned around, a warm, deep voice echoed from the end of the hallway, freezing her in place. Hey, little guy, are you okay? Aisha looked up, her heart skipping a beat. Ethan Caldwell was walking toward them, his deep navy suit tailored perfectly to his tall frame, his blonde hair catching the dim light. He was looking at Jaden, concern in his eyes, but also a glint of curiosity. Jaden instinctively moved closer to Aisha, clutching his teddy bear tighter. his blue eyes wide as he looked at the stranger. Aisha felt her blood turn cold. Ethan was here face to face with Jaden. She wanted to grab her son and disappear into the shadows, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. We're fine, she said, her voice barely steady, positioning herself protectively before Jaden. But Ethan's eyes didn't leave the boy. He crouched down, lowering himself to Jaden's level, a gentle smile forming on his lips. "Did you get lost?" he asked, his voice soft, just like he used to speak to her 4 years ago when they shared dreams under the moonlight. Jaden didn't respond right away, only stared at Ethan with a mix of curiosity and shyness. Aisha squeezed her son's hand, scrambling for words to break the moment, but her mind was blank. She looked at Ethan and watched how he tilted his head and how his eyes scanned Jaden's face. And then she saw it, the flicker of recognition. Ethan looked at Jaden, then at her, then back at Jaden again. The boy's blue eyes, identical to his, reflected a past he had never known. He looks familiar, Ethan said slowly, his voice dropping as if he were placing a long-lost puzzle piece. Aisha felt her chest tighten. She wanted to scream that it was just a coincidence that Jaden had nothing to do with him, but the words lodged in her throat. She remembered the last time they saw each other in a Brooklyn cafe, when Ethan had held her hand and promised to call after his trip to London. She remembered standing outside his office 3 months pregnant, unable to summon the courage to go in. And now standing before him with Jaden at her side, it felt like fate was punishing her for keeping the secret too long. "We need to go," Aisha said quickly, pulling Jaden closer. "He needs to rest." She tried to walk past Ethan, but he stood, his gaze locked onto her. "Wait," he said, his voice firmer now, but with a note of softness, as if he were holding back a bigger question. "I know you don't. We've met before." Aisha's heart pounded, ready to burst. She shook her head, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just a server. You must be mistaken." But she knew he wasn't. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, were digging through memory, and she feared he would find the truth. Sensing the tension, Jaden tugged on her hand. "Mommy, I want to go," he said, his voice small but clear. The word mommy made Ethan pause. He looked at Jaden, then at Aisha again, and she saw an unspoken question forming in his eyes. "Mommy?" he repeated, his voice low like a whisper. Aisha felt the world shrink until they were in this cold hallway. She wanted to flee, but Ethan's gaze held her in place, a pull she couldn't resist. I have to take him," Aisha said, her voice trembling. She pulled Jaden along, hurrying back toward the lounge, not daring to look back. But she could feel Ethan's eyes following her like a ghost that refused to let go. She heard his footsteps, light but steady, like he was about to follow. "Wait," he called, his voice echoing down the hallway. Aisha didn't stop, but her heart thrashed in her chest. Every step was a race against the truth. She pushed open the lounge door, pulled Jaden inside, and shut it behind them, leaning against it as if she could hold the world at bay. Jaden looked up at her, his blue eyes full of worry. "Mommy, who was that?" he asked, his voice innocent. Aisha knelt and hugged him tightly, shielding him from her fear. "Just someone from the party, baby," she said, though her voice shook so much she feared Jaden would notice. She stroked his hair and forced a smile, but her mind was in chaos. Ethan had seen Jaden. He had seen those eyes, and she knew he wouldn't dismiss that as coincidence. She glanced out the window. The snow had stopped falling, leaving a thin white layer on the ground, but the cold remained creeping into every breath. She thought of Victor, his predator's stare, and of Ethan and that spark of realization in his eyes. Her secret was no longer safe. Jaden snuggled into her, hugging his teddy bear, and Aisha felt a fierce resolve rise within her. She would protect him no matter what it took, even if it meant facing Ethan Victor or the entire world. But deep down, she knew this winter wouldn't end easily. A storm was coming, and this time, she wasn't sure she could outrun it. Outside the Grand Summit Hotel, the snow had stopped falling, leaving a thin white layer sparkling under the streetlights, like winter had paused only to make way for another storm. Inside the small staff lounge, Aisha Carter held Jaden tightly, her heart still pounding, after Ethan Caldwell, Jaden's father, had seen the boy. The flicker of recognition in Ethan's piercing blue eyes felt like a blade slicing through the wall of secrecy she had built over the past 4 years. She had pulled Jaden in here and shut the door behind them, trying to block out that look, but she knew Ethan was not a man to give up easily. He was out somewhere, and Aisha could feel the truth rising like floodwater, impossible to hold back. Jaden curled into her arms, clutching his teddy bear, his blue eyes filled with innocence and unease. "Mommy, will that man come back?" he asked, his voice tiny and still trembling after witnessing her panic. Aisha stroked his hair, trying to smile. "No, baby. We're safe now." But her words rang hollow even to herself. She thought of Jaden, how he loved hearing stories about trains, and lit up when she promised to take him to see the snow one day. He was the reason she survived night shifts, hard months, and loneliness. But now she feared that light could be snuffed out if Ethan or Victor Kane, the cunning reporter, unearthed the truth. She stood gently, laid Jaden on the fold-out bed, and pulled the blanket over him. "Rest for a bit," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Jaden nodded, hugging his teddy bear and closing his eyes, but Aisha knew he wasn't asleep. She walked to the window, staring at the thin snow on the ground. The cold crept into every breath, a reminder that this winter wasn't just a backdrop. It mirrored her soul, fragile, frozen, full of uncertainty. She thought of Ethan, his suspicious gaze, the gentle way he had crouched down to speak to Jaden. That tenderness both hurt and ignited longing. He had come dangerously close to the truth, and she didn't know how long she could run. A soft knock on the door made her jump. She turned, her heart thudding. "Who is it?" she called, quietly, not wanting to wake Jaden. There was no reply, but the door slowly opened and Ethan stepped inside. His navy blue suit was slightly rumpled, as if he had rushed to find her. His blue eyes locked onto hers, filled with determination and something like hurt. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm, leaving no room for avoidance. Aisha felt her chest tighten. She glanced at Jaden, still lying there, eyes closed, hands gripping his teddy bear. She stepped forward, placing herself between Ethan and her son, as if she could shield him from the storm approaching. "This isn't the time," she said, voice trembling. "I'm working and the boy needs rest." But Ethan didn't budge. He closed the door behind him, sealing them in together with the truth, hanging heavy in the air. "Stop pretending," Ethan said, his voice soft but cutting. "I know who you are. Aisha Carter. We met 4 years ago in Brooklyn. You disappeared without a word. I tried to find you and called your number, but it was disconnected. Now here you are, with a little boy." His eyes moved briefly to Jaden, then back to her. "A boy who has my eyes. Don't you think I have the right to know?" Aisha felt blood rush to her head, afraid and angry at once. She wanted to scream that he had left her, that he had chosen his ambitions over her. But she remembered those nights they shared when Ethan held her hand and promised never to leave her alone. She remembered standing outside his office in New York, pregnant with Jaden, but too scared to go inside, afraid he'd see her as a burden. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "You left Ethan. You went to London without saying goodbye. I called you, but your number was disconnected. I had to do everything on my own." Ethan's brow furrowed, pain flickering across his face. "I didn't vanish," he said, tense. I called you Aisha. I left messages. You never answered. When I got back to New York, you were gone. I thought you didn't want anything to do with me." He stepped closer, his voice softening into something almost pleading. "Tell me the truth. That boy, Jaden, he's my son, isn't he?" The question hung like a blade ready to cut through everything. Aisha felt tears threaten to rise, but she bit her lip to hold them back. She wanted to say yes, to let the truth pour out, but fear stopped her. Fear that Ethan would be angry, would demand custody, would pull Jaden into a world she didn't belong to. Fear that Victor Kane, lurking somewhere in the hotel, might overhear and turn their story into a scandal. "You're wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "Jaden is my son, only mine." But Ethan didn't believe her. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers, as if trying to see through every lie. "Don't do this," he said, calm but resolute. "I saw him, Aisha. I saw those eyes that smile. You can't hide him from me forever." He paused, voice dropping with sorrow. "If he's mine, you stole 4 years from me. 4 years I should have been a father." His words hit her like a punch to the chest. She wanted to scream that she had no choice, that she protected Jaden the only way she knew how. But before she could speak, another voice called from the hallway, "Mr. Caldwell." It was Victor Kane, his voice smooth and calculated. "I was looking forward to you asking about the charity speech. Is this a good time?" Aisha felt the blood drain from her face. Victor was right outside, and if he saw Jaden, everything would collapse if he walked in. Ethan glanced toward the door, then back at her eyes blazing with resolve. "This isn't over," he whispered, then turned and opened the door, blocking Victor before he could step inside. "I'll be out shortly," Ethan said, his voice firm. He shut the door again, but Aisha knew this moment was only a pause. Ethan had seen Jaden. He suspected, and he wouldn't stop until he had answers. She turned back to Jaden, who was now sitting up, his big blue eyes staring at her. "Mommy, who was that?" he asked, his voice innocent. Aisha knelt and pulled him close, trying to mask her fear. "Just someone I work with. Baby," she said, though her voice trembled so much she feared Jaden would notice. She glanced out the window where the snow glistened under the streetlight. Winter was still there, cold, unforgiving, like a reminder that her secret couldn't stay hidden forever. Ethan was getting closer to the truth. Victor was circling, and the storm she feared had already begun. And this time, she didn't know how to protect Jaden when it hit. The thin layer of snow outside the Grand Summit Hotel shimmered under the streetlights like a fragile curtain, trying to conceal the secrets fracturing inside. In the small staff lounge, Aisha Carter sat beside her 3-year-old son Jaden, her heart still racing from the confrontation with Ethan Caldwell. His suspicious gaze and the haunting question, "That boy is my son. Isn't he?" echoed in her mind like a death knell for the wall she had spent 4 years building to protect her secret. Victor Kane, the probing journalist, had unintentionally saved her from having to answer. But she knew Ethan wouldn't stop, and Victor was still lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jaden lay on the fold-out bed, clutching his teddy bear, his blue eyes half closed, but not fully asleep. "Mommy, I want to go home," he mumbled sleepily. Aisha gently stroked his hair, trying to summon a smile. "Soon, baby," she whispered, though her voice trembled. She thought of Jaden's bright grin when he talked about train models and how he held her hand each night before bed. He was the only light in her life, but now that light was under threat. From Ethan, from Victor, and from a rising sense of unease that she couldn't shake. She stood and walked to the window, staring at the snow-covered ground. Winter seemed to be resting, but the cold still slipped into every breath, a warning that the real storm had not yet arrived. She needed to get Jaden out of there. She had to stay out of Ethan's and Victor's reach, but they were both too close. She turned back to call for Marcus, her trusted co-worker, hoping he could watch Jaden. But footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. The door opened, and Marcus entered, his face full of worry. "Aisha, you need to hear this," he said, voice low and urgent. He glanced at Jaden to ensure the boy wasn't listening, then pulled her toward the door. "I just saw Victor talking to a guy in the ballroom. His name's Roland Pierce. He is a big investor who doesn't mind playing dirty. They talked about Ethan, and I heard Victor mention the kid and scandal. You got anything to do with that?" Aisha felt her blood run cold. Roland Pierce. She'd heard the name before in whispered conversations between hotel staff. A ruthless investor is known for using the information to manipulate rivals. If Victor was working for him, the danger wasn't just a tabloid story anymore. It was a larger scheme that could drag Jaden into the crossfire. I don't know," she said, her voice faltering. But Marcus's eyes showed he didn't believe her. "Aisha, if you're in trouble, tell me. You helped me keep my job once. Remember that." Before she could answer, a low voice echoed from the hallway. "Victor, I need you to find her now." It was Ethan. His tone was tense but commanding. Aisha and Marcus exchanged a look. Her heart pounded. Ethan was looking for her, and Victor was nearby. She glanced at Jaden now, asleep, his breathing steady. "Marcus, can you stay with him?" she whispered. "I need to go see what's happening." Marcus nodded, his eyes firm. "Go. I'll keep him safe." Aisha took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway, her heart heavy. She walked toward the ballroom where the chandelier lights and soft jazz music still floated in the air. But as she got closer, she saw Ethan standing in a shadowed corner, facing a tall man in a sleek gray suit. It was Roland Pierce, his eyes cold as ice, his smile venomous. Victor stood nearby, tapping notes into his phone, eyes scanning the area like he was hunting her. Aisha hid behind a large pillar, trying to listen. "Caldwell, you might want to reconsider," Roland said smoothly, though his voice carried a thinly veiled threat. "I hear you've got a secret, a child. Victor here's quite talented at digging things up. If you don't give up your stake in that new project, I'll make sure the world knows you're just another deadbeat dad hiding a kid to protect your image." Ethan's fists clenched, anger flashing in his eyes. "Are you threatening me, Pierce?" he growled. "I don't play these games. Get out before I call security." Roland chuckled softly, unfazed. "You forget you beat me on the Dubai deal, Caldwell. I don't forgive. And I don't forget. One call from Victor and your stock tanks. Want to test me?" Victor smirked, holding up his phone as if ready to release the story. Aisha felt her heart stop. They knew about Jaden, or at least suspected. And if they made it public, Ethan wouldn't be the only one destroyed. Jaden would become the center of a scandal. Her son's life would be torn apart. She wanted to run out to scream at them to stay away from her child, but her feet wouldn't move. She thought of Jaden's wide, innocent eyes, how he'd asked if trains could go through snow. She couldn't let him be hurt. She watched as Ethan stepped closer to Roland, his voice low and sharp. "If you touch anyone connected to me, Pierce, you'll regret it." Roland only smiled, eyes gleaming with challenge. "We'll see, Caldwell," he said, then turned and walked off, Victor following close behind. Aisha leaned against the pillar, breathless, like she'd just run a mile. She'd heard enough to know her secret was no longer just between her and Ethan. Roland Pierce wanted to weaponize Jaden, and Victor was his blade. She glanced at Ethan, still standing there, shoulders tense, eyes scanning the room like he was searching for her. He wouldn't stop until he had answers. and Roland wouldn't stop until he ruined him. She turned and ran back down the hallway, heart pounding. Back in the staff lounge, Marcus sat beside Jaden, his face tightening when he saw her expression. "What happened?" he asked. Aisha knelt beside Jaden, gently stroking his hair, barely holding back tears. "They know, Marcus," she whispered. "They know about Jaden. I don't know how to protect him anymore." Marcus placed a steady hand on her shoulder, voice firm. "We'll find a way, I promise." Outside the window, the thin layer of snow still sparkled, but Aisha felt the real storm closing in, not from the skies, but from the people trying to tear her world apart. Roland Pierce, Victor Kane, and Ethan Caldwell. Each one in their way, I was pulling her closer to the edge. She held Jaden tighter, more determined than ever to shield him. But deep inside, she knew this winter would not be merciful. The thin layer of snow outside the Grand Summit Hotel reflected the streetlights glistening like shattered fragments of a collapsing secret. In the small staff lounge, Aisha Carter sat beside her 3-year-old son Jaden, her heart heavy after secretly overhearing the confrontation between Ethan Caldwell and Roland Pierce. Roland's threat to use Jaden to destroy Ethan's reputation and empire echoed in her mind like a cold wind cutting through fragile snow. Victor Kane, the relentless journalist working for Roland, was an imminent threat, and Aisha knew that if she didn't act, Jaden's life would be torn apart by tabloid headlines. Jaden slept soundly on the fold-out bed, his teddy bear tightly to his chest, breathing evenly, though his small face still carried hints of worry. Aisha gently brushed his hair, thinking about his radiant smile when he talked about toy trains, and how he held her hand every night and asked when they'd watch the snowfall. Jaden was her reason to fight, but now she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff with Roland and Victor pushing her toward the abyss. She glanced at Marcus, her trusted colleague who stood near the door, his eyes steady but filled with concern. "We have to do something, Aisha," he whispered, keeping his voice low to not wake Jaden. "That Pierce guy isn't bluffing." Aisha nodded and rose to her feet, stepping toward the window. The thin snow outside seemed to whisper a warning that her secret was unraveling bit by bit, and winter's chill was closing in around her. She thought of Ethan, the pain in his eyes when he asked about Jaden, the fury when he confronted Roland. She knew he wouldn't stop until he got answers, but she also knew Roland wouldn't stop until Ethan was destroyed. "We need proof," she said, voice trembling but firm. "If Roland's playing dirty, there has to be a trail. We have to find it before he goes public about Jaden." Marcus furrowed his brow, his gaze drifting to Jaden. "Are you sure? Going after someone like Pierce isn't a game. If we get caught—" He didn't finish, but Aisha understood. She knew the risks, losing her job, being sued, or dragging Jaden into the storm. But she also knew that doing nothing was more dangerous. "I don't have a choice, Marcus," she said, voice steel. "Jaden is everything to me. I can't let that man use my son." Marcus nodded, respect flashing in his eyes. "All right. I owe you one and I'll help, but we'll need more people." Aisha thought quickly. She knew the hotel inside and out, which staff overheard VIP conversations and which corners held whispered secrets. "Get in touch with Carla and Jamal," she said. "Carla works the front desk. She sees everything. Jamal's in security, and he has access to the management office. If Roland left a trace, they'll know." Marcus nodded, pulling out his phone to text them, eyes focused. "I'll call them. But be careful. Victor's circle and I don't think he's working for Pierce just for money." Aisha checked on Jaden to ensure he was still asleep, then quietly opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The frigid air made her shiver, but she didn't stop. She headed toward the management office, where VIP guest files were sometimes stored. The hallway was dim and quiet, the distant hum of jazz from the ballroom barely audible. What she was about to do was dangerous, but the thought of Jaden being caught in a media storm left her no choice. She remembered standing outside Ethan's office in New York, pregnant with Jaden, but too afraid to go in. This time she wouldn't run. Carla and Jamal appeared at the end of the hallway, their expressions anxious but resolute. Her curly hair pulled into a high bun. Carla whispered, "I heard Pierce sometimes emails the manager asking to delete guest records. Once I saw an email about a special payment." Jamal, tall and soft-spoken, nodded. "I can get into the office. But if we get caught, we're in serious trouble." Aisha took their hands, her voice shaky but determined. "Thank you. I know we're risking a lot, but I can't let my son get hurt." They slipped into the management office, a small room with a wooden desk and an old computer. Jamal stood watch at the door, eyes scanning the corridor. Carla powered on the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Aisha stood beside her, her heart pounding, as if every second was a hammer strike against her hidden secret. "Got it," Carla whispered, opening an email from Roland to the hotel manager. It referenced a bribe to conceal an illegal transaction. Aisha scanned the contents, including the names of shell companies and large payments. They needed this proof enough to make Roland back off if exposed. But before Carla could save the file, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Aisha turned, her heart freezing. Victor Kane stood in the doorway, eyes sharp as blades. "Well, this is interesting," he said smoothly, though his tone dripped with threat. "Hotel staff snooping through private files. I'm sure Mr. Pierce would love to hear about this." Aisha's blood ran cold, but her instincts kicked in. She stepped forward and accidentally knocked over a champagne glass from a nearby tray, spilling it across Victor's shirt. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she gasped, feigning panic. Victor stepped back, swearing as he tried to wipe his soaked shirt. Carla saved the file onto a USB and quickly shut down the computer. "Move," Victor snapped. But Jamal stood in his way, blocking the door, his stance firm. "You should go somewhere else," Jamal said, voice low but commanding. Victor scowled at them before turning away, still soaked. Aisha let out a shaky breath, clutching the USB in her hand. They had the proof now, but Victor knew they were onto something. She glanced out the window where the snow still sparkled like glass, a reminder that they had only narrowly escaped danger. She thought of Jaden, of his innocent blue eyes, and felt resolve build in her chest. She would protect him no matter what, even if that meant facing Roland, Victor, or Ethan himself. She returned to Marcus, Carla, and Jamal, her eyes shining with determination. "We have the evidence," she said firmly. "Now we have to get it to Ethan before Pierce strikes." Marcus nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "You're stronger than you think, Aisha." But Aisha knew the fight was far from over. The winter storm was coming, and she would be ready to face it. The thin layer of snow outside the Grand Summit Hotel sparkled under the lights, like shards of broken glass, reflecting shattered secrets. In the icy hallway, Aisha Carter clutched the USB drive, containing proof of Roland Pierce's illicit dealings, her heart pounding like it might burst. The dangerous search through the management office carried out with Marcus, Carla, and Jamal had uncovered emails and documents enough to expose Roland, the ruthless investor threatening to weaponize Jaden, her 3-year-old son, with Ethan Caldwell to destroy Ethan's reputation. But the sudden appearance of Victor Kane, the journalist working for Roland, had reminded her that time was running out. She had to get the evidence to Ethan before Roland went public with Jaden's secret. Aisha rushed back to the staff room where Marcus watched Jaden. The boy was fast asleep on the fold-out bed, clutching his teddy bear tightly, his blue eyes closed in innocent slumber. She knelt, brushing his hair gently, thinking of his bright smile, when she told train stories the way he asked whether the snow had stopped falling. Jaden was her reason to fight, but the thought of him being pulled into a scandal made her tremble. "I will protect you," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Marcus stood by the door, concern in his eyes. "What did you find?" he asked. Aisha held up the USB, her voice steady. "Evidence. Bribery and shell companies are enough to make Pierce back off. But I need to get it to Ethan." Marcus nodded, but his eyes were wary. "Be careful. Victor knows what we're doing. He'll alert Pierce." Aisha took a deep breath, the cold from the hallway creeping into her bones. The snow outside the window seemed to warn her that her secret was unraveling piece by piece, and this winter would show no mercy. She thought of Ethan, his wounded look when he asked about Jaden, the fury when he confronted Roland. She knew he wouldn't forgive her if she kept hiding the truth, but she feared facing Roland might drag Jaden into even greater danger. She left the room, gripping the USB tight, heading toward the private meeting room near the ballroom, where Marcus said Ethan was meeting with investors. The hallway was dim and quiet, with only faint jazz drifting from afar. As she neared the room, she saw Ethan standing just outside the door, his navy blue suit slightly disheveled, tension in his eyes. He looked at her, recognition flashing across his face, as if he knew she had come with something meaningful. "Aisha," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Are you going to run forever? We need to talk about the boy." Before she could respond, a smooth voice cut through the shadows. "How touching." Roland Pierce stepped forward in a sleek gray suit, a sinister smile on his face. Victor stood beside him, phone in hand, his gaze as sharp as a knife. "But I'm afraid your little story is about to hit the front page." Aisha felt the blood drain from her face. Roland eyed the USB in her hand, his expression darkening with interest. "You have something, don't you? Hand it over, or I'll ensure the world knows about Caldwell's secret child." Ethan stepped in front of Aisha, eyes blazing. "That's enough, Pierce," he growled. "What do you want? Money, shares? Or is this just about revenge over Dubai?" Roland chuckled softly, completely unfazed. "All of the above, Caldwell. But mostly, I want to watch you fall. One word from Victor and your stock crashes. Your saintly image. Gone. That child. Just a bonus." He turned to Aisha, his voice like ice. "And you, Ms. Carter, will be painted as a gold digger who hid a child for a billionaire's money." Aisha tightened her grip on the USB, fury overtaking her fear. "You don't get to touch my son," she said, shaking but resolute. She stepped forward, facing Roland head-on, eyes blazing. "We have the evidence, emails, transactions, shell corporations. You paid bribes to cover up dirty deals. One call from us and you'll be in prison." She held up the USB. Ethan looked at her, eyes filled with surprise and admiration. He took her hand, his voice low but firm. "You're telling the truth." Aisha nodded, never looking away from Roland. "Yes." Roland smirked, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "You think a few emails can take me down?" He sneered. "I have connections, sweetheart. You leak, I leak. We both go down. But I bet Caldwell loses more." He stepped forward, eyes locked on Ethan. "Give me your shares and I'll keep quiet about the kid. Otherwise, Victor, hit send right now." Victor raised his phone, his finger hovering over the screen. Aisha's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. She thought of Jaden, those innocent blue eyes, his unwavering belief that she would keep him safe. She couldn't let Roland win. "You're wrong," she said, voice sharp as glass. "We don't just have emails. We have witnesses. The hotel staff saw you exchange money. One wrong move and you'll lose everything." Roland laughed loudly, but it didn't hide his tension. He lunged for the USB, but Ethan was faster, shoving him back. "Don't touch her!" Ethan snapped, his protective fury blazing. Roland stumbled, eyes shining with rage. "You'll regret this, Caldwell," he shouted, turning to Victor. "Send it now." But before Victor could press send, footsteps thundered down the hall. Marcus, Carla, and Jamal appeared with 2 hotel security guards. "That's enough," Jamal said, his voice deep and commanding. "Mr. Pierce, you need to come with us." Roland glared, eyes burning with hatred. But as the guards approached, he backed away. "This isn't over," he growled, then was escorted out, Victor scrambling after him. Aisha slumped against the wall, breathing heavily, the USB still in her hand. Ethan looked at her, eyes filled with a mix of anger and admiration. "You did it," he said, voice low. "But we're not done. Jaden, I need the truth." Aisha nodded, tears brimming. She knew she couldn't hide anymore. Outside the window, the snow glistened, but the cold lingered, reminding them the storm was far from over. Roland might be gone for now, but Victor was still out there, and the truth about Jaden was teetering on the edge, ready to erupt. The thin layer of snow outside the Grand Summit Hotel shimmered under the lights, like fragments of a secret that could no longer be hidden. In the frigid hallway, Aisha Carter stood beside Ethan Caldwell, still clutching the USB drive containing evidence against Roland Pierce. Their earlier confrontation with Roland, the ruthless investor, threatening to expose their 3-year-old son Jaden, had pushed her to the edge. The bribery and shell company evidence had forced Roland to back down, but Victor Kane, the journalist working for him, remained a threat. The determined look in Ethan's eyes, demanding the truth about Jaden, told Aisha she couldn't run any longer. She glanced toward the staff room where Marcus was watching Jaden. The little boy slept soundly, clutching his teddy bear tightly to his chest, unaware that his world teetered on the edge of a storm. Aisha thought of Jaden's smile, the way he asked if trains could get through the snow, and those blue eyes so much like Ethan's, shining with innocent trust. Jaden was why she fought, but she feared going public would drag him into the media spotlight, where Roland and Victor could attack. "Ethan," she said, trembling, "if we go public about Jaden, they won't stop. Victor will write the story, and Roland will twist it to hurt you, and our son." Ethan looked at her, his deep blue eyes a mix of anger and tenderness. "Aisha, I've already lost 4 years not knowing my son. I'm not losing another day." He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "This evidence can stop Roland, but the rumors are already spreading. I just saw a post online, vague, but enough to get investors asking questions. If we don't control the story, they will." He paused, his gaze softening. "I want to protect Jaden, and you, but I need you to trust me." Aisha felt tears sting her eyes. She remembered standing outside Ethan's New York office, while pregnant, too scared to go in. She feared he would reject her, and that Jaden would be seen as a burden. But now, looking into Ethan's eyes, she saw a man ready to fight for a family he had just discovered. "I was wrong to hide him from you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "When you left for London, I called, but your number was disconnected. I stood in front of your office. Ethan, but I was afraid you wouldn't want us. I just wanted to protect Jaden." Ethan took her hand, warm but slightly trembling. "I tried to find you," he said, voice full of regret. "When I came back to New York, you were gone. I thought you didn't want me. If I had known about Jaden—" He trailed off, pain flickering in his eyes. "I'm not perfect, Aisha, but I want to do this right. For Jaden. For us." His words cut deep, painful but healing. Aisha wanted to believe him, but fear still clung to her. "If we go public, Jaden will be hunted," she said. "Paparazzi, tabloids. He's just a child." Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. "I'll hire security lawyers. I won't let anyone harm him. But if we stay silent, Roland and Victor will tell the story their way. I want to say that Jaden is my son, and I'm proud of him." He squeezed her hand gently. Let's do this together. I'll announce it during my closing speech tonight. Will you stand with me? Aisha took a deep breath, the hallway's chill sinking into her bones. She looked out the window, where the snow sparkled faintly, like a promise that winter could melt if she faced it head-on. She thought of Jaden, how he deserved a father, how she was tired of hiding. Yes, she said, her voice shaky but firm. But I want to be there, beside you, for Jaden. Ethan smiled, a soft, genuine smile, like sunlight breaking through winter clouds. Thank you, he said, embracing her, a short but warm hug, as if they were finding each other again after 4 years apart. They returned to the staff room, where Marcus sat beside Jaden. The boy stirred, blinking sleepily, and smiled at Aisha. Mommy, I dreamed about trains, he said softly. Aisha knelt and held him close, tears falling. Your train can get through anything, baby, she whispered. She looked at Ethan standing by the door, his eyes gentle as he watched Jaden. She knew this decision would change everything, but for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Marcus stood, worry in his eyes. I just saw Victor in the ballroom. He's taking pictures. He's not giving up. Aisha nodded, handing the USB to Ethan. Use this if Roland strikes back, she said. Ethan took it, his gaze steady. I'll call the lawyers now. If Victor publishes anything, we'll sue. He looked at Aisha, his voice low. Are you ready? She took a deep breath, held Jaden's hand, and felt his warmth. Ready, she said, though her heart raced. They left the staff room, walking toward the ballroom, where the chandelier light and jazz music still filled the air. Aisha felt the cold of the hallway, but this time it didn't shake her. She thought of the snow outside, how it could melt when light broke through. She and Ethan were about to tell the truth, and though a media storm might follow, she knew they would face it together. Jaden held her hand, his blue eyes glowing, and Aisha felt a newfound strength. This winter might be harsh, but she would not let it swallow her family whole. Snow had begun to fall gently outside the Grand Summit Hotel, delicate flakes swirling under the lights like a promise of new beginnings after the storm. Inside the lavish ballroom chandelier, light bathed the faces of the elite. Still, the atmosphere had shifted from lively to tense curiosity as rumors of Ethan Caldwell's secret child spread across social media. Aisha Carter stood at the edge of the room holding Jaden's hand, her heart pounding as Ethan prepared to step onto the stage. Their decision to go public that Jaden was their son was risky but necessary to control the narrative before Roland Pierce and Victor Kane turned it into a scandal. Jaden clung to her teddy bear pressed to his chest, his blue eyes wide as he scanned the crowd. Mommy, so many people, he whispered innocently. Aisha knelt beside him, brushing his curls, smiling, despite the fear twisting inside her. It's just a big party, sweetheart, she said, thinking of his stories about trains, about how he always held her hand at night. Jaden was why she had agreed with Ethan, even if she feared the glare of media lights would hurt him. She glanced toward Ethan standing near the stage in a tailored navy suit, his expression both determined and gentle as he looked their way. Marcus stood behind her, eyes scanning the room. Victor's over there, he murmured, nodding toward the far corner where Victor Kane snapped photos, phone in hand. He hasn't given up, but I've told security to watch him. Aisha nodded, grateful for Marcus's loyalty, the man she once helped save from losing his job. She gripped Jaden's hand tighter, feeling the chill from the nearby window, like a reminder that winter hadn't yet loosened its grip. Snowflakes fell steadily outside, delicate but relentless, like the hope she clung to that truth would set them free, rather than destroy them. Ethan stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, light illuminating his sharp features and deep blue eyes. The crowd fell silent, anticipation and curiosity thick in the air. "Thank you all for staying." He began, his voice calm but commanding. "Tonight was meant to celebrate generosity, but it's also a chance for me to be honest." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room before landing on Aisha and Jaden, drawing strength from them. Aisha's heart raced as she tightened her grip on Jaden's hand. "I've just learned something that has changed my life," Ethan continued, steady but full of emotion. "I have a son, Jaden. He's 3 years old, and he is the greatest gift I never knew I had until today." The crowd gasped and whispered, eyes turning to Aisha and Jaden. Her cheeks burned, but she stood tall, clutching Jaden's hand like a shield. Ethan looked at her, his eyes warm. Aisha Carter, Jaden's mother, raised him alone with a strength I deeply admire. "I'm proud to be Jaden's father and will never hide him." Tears streamed down Aisha's cheeks, part relief, part fear. Jaden looked up at her, confused. "Mommy, is he talking about me?" he whispered. She nodded, holding him close, trying to hide her trembling heart. The crowd began to clap softly at first, then more fully, as if moved by Ethan's honesty. But Aisha spotted Victor in the corner, camera-raised eyes predatory. She knew he wasn't finished, not yet. Ethan raised a hand to quiet the room. "I also want to condemn those who tried to use personal information to extort me," he said, voice sharp. "They won't win. I have evidence of illegal activities, and my legal team is already involved." He held up the USB. Aisha had given him, his eyes unwavering. "But more than that, I want tonight to be a beginning. I'm launching the Jaden's Hope Foundation to support single parents and children so no one has to face hardship alone." The ballroom erupted in applause, louder, more emotional. Aisha's chest tightened, not with fear, but awe. Ethan had transformed a potential scandal into a powerful story of hope, not just protecting Jaden, but honoring her. She looked at him no longer, seeing just a powerful billionaire, but the man she once loved, the man who once promised to change the world. Jaden tugged on her sleeve, his eyes bright. "Mommy, is he talking about trains too?" he asked, making her laugh through tears. Marcus touched her shoulder, pride in his eyes. "He did it," he whispered. "And so did you." But she noticed Victor slipping out of the ballroom, phone still in hand. She knew Roland Pierce, though temporarily defeated, wouldn't give up easily. She glanced at security, relieved to see them trailing Victor's path. Ethan descended the stage, making his way toward them, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Jaden. He knelt, smiling. "Hi, Jaden," he said gently. "How's your train doing?" Jaden blinked, shy but curious. "I like it when it goes through snow," he replied, making Ethan laugh softly. Aisha watched them, her heart warming, despite the lingering cold from the window. The snow outside fell like a healing curtain, hiding old scars. She knew challenges remained. Victor, Roland, and the press would return. But this time, she wasn't alone. Ethan stood locking eyes with her. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me the chance to be a father." She nodded, tears falling freely now, knowing that this cold winter had brought them closer than ever before. Light snow began to fall outside the Grand Summit Hotel, the flakes sparkling under the lights like tiny crystals, ushering in a new beginning. Inside the ballroom, the chandelier lights dimmed, giving way to smaller lamps near the windows that illuminated the thin layer of snow on the ground. Aisha Carter stood beside her 3-year-old son Jaden, feeling the warmth of his small hand in hers as Ethan Caldwell's speech ended. He had just revealed to the world that Jaden was his son, transforming a potential scandal into a story of hope, and announced the creation of the Jaden's Hope Fund to support single-parent families. The applause still echoed, But Aisha knew the storm wasn't over. Victor Kane, the tabloid journalist, and Roland Pierce, the ruthless investor, were still threats. Jaden looked up at her, clutching his teddy bear tightly. His bright blue eyes filled with curiosity. "Mommy," he said. "I'm his son," the boy whispered innocently. Aisha knelt and hugged him, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice breaking. "He's your dad." She thought of the years she had raised Jaden alone, his smile when talking about trains, and the way he asked whether the snow would ever stop falling. Jaden was her light, and now she had given him a chance to know his father, even if that meant risking exposure under the media's harsh glare. Ethan stepped down from the stage, his gaze tender as he approached them. Kneeling beside Jaden, he smiled warmly. "Hi, Jaden," he said, his voice gentle. "You like trains. Someday I'll build a model train with you. Sound good?" Jaden blinked, shy but glowing. "A train through the snow?" he asked. Ethan chuckled, his eyes lighting up. "Of course. A train that goes through everything." Aisha watched them. Her heart warmed despite the lingering cold from the window. She saw not just a powerful billionaire, but the man she once loved, the man who once promised he would change the world. Marcus stood nearby, pride in his eyes. "Security just detained Victor," he whispered. He tried to send the article, but Ethan's legal team stopped him. "And Roland. He left word he's under investigation for bribery." Aisha exhaled relief washing over her, though she knew this wasn't the end. The media would still watch them, and Jaden would need protection. She looked at Ethan and saw him nod as if reading her mind. "I've hired a security team," he said, voice firm. "Jaden will be safe, I promise." They walked toward the large window, watching the snow fall gently, each flake a whispered promise of healing. "Mommy, the snow is so pretty," Jaden exclaimed, making Aisha laugh through her tears. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze locked with hers. "Thank you," he said, his voice tight and emotional. "For raising Jaden. For giving me this chance." Aisha nodded, tears glistening. "And thank you," she whispered, "for not walking away." She remembered the day she stood outside Ethan's office in New York, pregnant with Jaden, terrified he would reject them. She remembered the nights holding Jaden, wondering if she had done the right thing by hiding the truth. But now, standing beside Ethan and Jaden, she felt the past melting away like snow in the sun. They weren't a perfect family. Challenges remained, curious eyes from the press, the scars of 4 years apart. But they were a family, and that was enough to fight for. The guests in the ballroom began to disperse, leaving the space calm and quiet. Marcus gave Aisha a proud pat on the shoulder before stepping away to provide them a moment of privacy. Jaden held both their hands, his eyes sparkling as he watched the snow. "Mommy, Daddy, can we build the train?" he asked brightly. Ethan and Aisha exchanged a look and burst out laughing, the tension melting between them. "Of course," son Ethan said, pulling Jaden into a hug. Aisha felt Ethan's arm wrap around her, drawing all three of them close, an unbreakable circle. Outside the window, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the earlier layers with a fresh cover, as if gently concealing the pain of the past. Aisha thought of winter, harsh, bitter, yet also pure. She once feared it would swallow her whole, but now it felt like a welcome embrace, a promise of better days. Ethan looked at her, his eyes shining. "I used to think my greatest asset was my company," he said, voice deep and sincere. "But I was wrong. It's here with you and Jaden." Aisha smiled, tears glimmering. She held Ethan's and Jaden's hands tightly, feeling their warmth in the cold. Winter was still there, but it no longer scared her. They had survived the secrets and survived Roland and Victor, and found each other. The snow fell gently like a lullaby, and Aisha knew their family just beginning would be strong enough to weather any storm.